Hey, it's Andre with CruzeKits.com, and today we're going to be installing the version 3.4 PCV Fix Kit. And I apologize if I talk a little quickly, I don't want to make this video too long. Alright, the first thing you'll need, of course, is the Fix Kit itself. And normally it'll come in a post office bag, but sometimes it'll come in one of these. And we're going to go through the parts and make sure that everything you need is already here. Alright, so first you're going to have a 5/8 hose that's going to be 16 inches long. You're going to have one that's 9 inches long, a 5/16 that's 16 inches long, and then you've got a bag full of hardware. We're going to take the bag and open that up. Alright, inside you're going to have two check valves. You're going to have a Y fitting, a T fitting that's got a little angle at the bottom of it. You're going to have a rubberized clamp, 4 large clamps right here, and then it should be 8 of these smaller clamps. I'm going to put those off to the side. A round washer, a screw with a pointy tip on it, a clip or a plug, 2 glue dots, some epoxy, a note sheet, which I highly recommend you read before you begin, and an alcohol wipe. And of course, another 4 1/4 inch section of hose and 3 extra zip ties. As far as tools we're going to be working with here today, we have a knife, a cutter. You can use your knife, but the cutter makes it quicker for me. Phillips and flathead screwdrivers, some pliers, and if you're getting the install tools, you'll need a drill, impact driver rather, some silicone spray, brake parts cleaner, and that should be it. Alright, so the purpose of the PCV Fix Kit is to address the intake manifold failure on these cars. And the intake manifold failure, if you're looking at your engine, you'll see the intake manifold like so. And so you're going to take the PCV pipe off the top. The PCV pipe is going to look like this, and it'll be basically sitting on top. You're going to pull this clip back, pull it out carefully, not to let it fly anywhere. Pull this hose off, and inside is where you're going to be looking for a check valve. I'm not sure if this will work on the camera very well, but if you look inside that hole, you should see at the end of it a series of other holes. I'm going to have to go the other way. Inside, you'll see a hole right at the end over there on the firewall side, and you see some other holes around it as well. And what ends up happening is a check valve there ends up failing. Now, if you want to install this kit as preventive maintenance and there's already a check valve there, you can simply break it off with a flathead screwdriver. Just kind of stick it in there and give it a good whack with the palm of your hand, and it should break off. Then just make sure the center hole is clear. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do for the PCV Fix Kit is we're going to mix up the epoxy. And you do this first because the epoxy takes a little while to set. Now, it should be a given that you should be reading instructions on the epoxy as well. This stuff has a 24-hour cure, but typically it'll dry in 15 hours. So it'll set 4 to 6 hours, cures in 15 to 24. So be prepared to not have your car for about a day. Normally, you can get this started in one evening and drive your car the next morning or afternoon. So if you do it on a weekend, you're not going to be out for too long. All right. So we did the 2 epoxies. We're going to mix them in equal order. To puncture these, you basically take the cap, stick it inside, it's open. Do the same for the other one. So again, equal ratios of each. And you don't need much. These tubes are way more epoxy than you will ever need for this job. If you mix up the entire things, you have used way too much. I didn't actually grab myself something to mix it with, so I'll grab a spare zip tie here. And basically, you're mixing up the epoxy until it's a gray color. All right, now that that's done, we're going to let that sit, and we're going to move on to the next part. Off of your car, you'll need the PCV pipe, which looks like this. I got a brand new one so I can show you guys easily. And also the evap purge valve. The evap purge valve on the manifold is going to be sitting right around here. And you're going to be taking this off as well. Now, for the evap purge valve, you will need to remove this section of line right here. And so I'll show you kind of how to do these. And for this part, I recommend using some gloves. And be careful, because you will be using a knife, and if you are not careful, you can cut yourself, and I can't be held liable for you cutting yourself. So if you're not comfortable with this, find a buddy, find a friend, find somebody who is, and I'll be showing you how to do it. All right, first I'm going to do is cut the first section off, get the knife, and basically put a slit all the way across. Once you do that, this comes off. If you scratch the inside barb a little bit, it's not too big a deal. It'll seal pretty well regardless. And if you need to, you might have to make a second slit. And of course, hold it in such a way that if you slip, it's not going to go into your finger. Normally these will just peel right off. So that part is done. Throw those away. So you should end up with something like this. Next part is going to be for the PCV pipe. You're going to need to retain these. So when you're taking this off of the cart itself, leave these in place. And to do that, you simply cut the tape that's underneath them, like so. I didn't cut it well enough. Simply cut the tape off. It's not cooperating with me today. Okay. That's an especially thick section of tape. Okay. There's a little tab right here. You have to pull this out. Okay. So this stays on the car. And you're basically working with this. And here it's kind of the same story. Now you can speed this part along by using some boiling water to soften up this nylon right here. But what I'll just usually do is I'll cut these off like so. And then do the same thing we did before. Kind of start peeling, trying to work our way around. If you cannot work your way around, this is a little stiffer, then put a slit through the side of it, grab some pliers, and start undoing it with the pliers. And if you work your way down, it should start peeling off, just little by little. You might have to put another slit in it, just so you can get further down. And again, getting some boiling water on this is a little bit easier because it's softer and it peels back a little quicker. And there we have that one. That one's off, good to go. We're gonna do the same over here. Again, if you're doing this, don't keep your finger off it, because if it'll slip, it'll go right through your finger. This one came right off. Okay, and we're done with that part. Now there's a supplemental video I will put in the link in this description for this next part, but I will show it to you briefly here. What we're doing is we're basically installing a plug inside this manifold to seal up where the holes used to be so you don't have an internal boost leak. The whole point of the PCV Fix Kit is so that you take the check valve that used to be inside and you route one externally instead, which can be serviced very easily. Now to do that, I'm going to be taking the gloves off for this part. And the first thing we'll need to do is clean the inside of that port. And if you've got brushes that'll fit, that's great. If not, there's an add-on option in the CruzeKits website that has a custom-made steel bristle brush and the screwdriver that you will need in the correct size to install the plug. And so we're going to do here, get some brake clean, kind of spray it inside. And the goal here is to get it clean and dry on the firewall side of that port where the plug is going to be. You're not really concerned about anything else. And this brush really helps speed up the process because it's made to fit the exact port and the exact height that you need inside where the check valve is. So basically run this inside for a bit. And that's it. Take a look inside. Make sure everything is clean. It's going to be hard to see it here with the camera because the exposure kind of cuts some of it off, but you'll see right there. We are good to go. You might have to wait for it to dry if you use too much brake clean. If so, wait for that to dry. That has to be dry when you do the next part. Now we're going to turn this back around. Now for this next part, this part is extremely important that you pay attention to this. You've got an alcohol wipe here, and it's here for two reasons. One, so you can clean what you're working with, and two, so you can clean your hands. The number one complaint that I have had in the past, which happens about 1 to every 200 kits that ship out, is that somebody loses that plug inside the manifold. But I also have complaints from people that the plug sticks too well inside the manifold to the screwdriver, and sometimes removing the screwdriver pulls the plug back out. So I'm going to help you avoid both of those problems here. First thing is make sure your hands are clean, okay? You don't want any grease or oil from your hands to get on that. If you want to go wash your hands in a sink, that's totally fine, but if you don't have a sink nearby, you can use this. The next part is to clean the head of the plug. Just clean that really well. Let that dry. And then clean the screwdriver tip really well as well. Now there's probably going to be some manufacturing coating on this. Some oil to prevent corrosion perhaps. I'm not entirely sure. But just to be 100% safe, make sure those are clean with the alcohol wipe. Now I'll give you two glue dots here because if you screw one up, then you've always got a backup. And the first thing you're going to do is peel this layer back. And you're going to expose basically one of the glue dots right there. You're going to take the plug, being careful not to touch the head of the plug, and secure that directly to the actual glue dot. Once that is secured, you're going to peel back some of that glue dot and make sure it stays attached to the plug itself, not the film backing. You want to avoid using your fingers. You'd much rather use the tools because your fingers may still have some oil on them. As you can see, this stuff is very tacky. So if you do manage to somehow lose the plug, this definitely wasn't clean enough. All right, so now that we've got this kind of set up, you're going to face the opening of the plug anywhere but straight up. So to the side, facing down, doesn't really matter. Take the plug and center the bottom of the plug to the end of the screwdriver approximately, and press it down. You can kind of see my screwdriver's bending here. Press it down so it's pretty well secured to the plug. Now once you've done this, this plug is pretty much stuck to the screwdriver. You can bang it around against anything and it's not moving. So there should be no reason why you could potentially lose this inside the manifold because this is stuck on there pretty good. All right, the next part, whatever you used to mix that epoxy with, grab some of that epoxy and attach it to this clip here. Again, you don't need much. You don't need to coat it like crazy because all you're doing, the epoxy is going to be sealing the holes around this clip, and it's going to be securing the clip and sealing it to the manifold so that you cannot possibly have any boost leak in that space. Now, if you watch my supplemental video, I do recommend you try pressing it in there and kind of feeling around for where the port is before you try it with some epoxy. But for the purpose of time, we're going to jump right into it because I've done this a few times before. Okay, so now that we're good to go, we're going to be keeping this bottom of the screwdriver pressed against the bottom of the port so that the plug itself doesn't ride along the top of the port. You get it right in there. Make sure it's not to the left, it's not to the right. I'm going to try to show you with the camera as well as I can here. It's facing straight backward. Okay, going to lower it all the way down until you hit the bottom. You're going to push it forward and raise it slowly, and you're going to feel it slip. I don't know if you saw what my hand was doing there. I'm going to do it again. All the way at the bottom, push it forward lightly, raise it up, Apologize. Let's do that again. I turned it on accident. Push it forward, raise it up, and you'll see it slip inside. When you see it slip, pop it into place. And that's really all it took, is just popping into place. And then pull the screwdriver straight out. Don't pull the screwdriver back, pull it straight up out of the manifold. Now, if you look inside with a flashlight again, you're going to see what this ended up doing. I'm going to shine it inside right here. You'll see that we have a plug directly in there, and the epoxy is barely dripping out the bottom, but it's sealed up against the wall. And we'll take a look on the other side. This is why I do this with the manifold off the car, so you can kind of see what we're doing here. You can see that there's epoxy around the plug. You didn't need a whole lot, but the plug is sealed to the manifold, and now the manifold is plugged up. That's really all it takes. You can put a little more epoxy than that if you want to. That's probably just about right. Just basically put a gob around the clip of the plug, the tip of the plug, but that's essentially it. Looks like I had a spare screw already in here for this next part. And next we're going to get to the next part of this installation video. All right. Now the previous video had you using a heat gun to secure the fittings for that purge valve line, and we figured out a much better and quicker way to do this than having to use a heat gunner device and some silicone spray. So what we're going to do here is we're going to be attaching this hose, which is a 4 1/4 inch section of hose, to the evap purge valve line. It helps if you use some silicone spray, so for the purpose of this video we're going to be using some, just to kind of speed things up and make things easier. At this point you could probably put your gloves back on because you're going to need some extra leverage, so that'll certainly help. All right, so the first thing I'll do, mix up the silicone spray and spray it on the barbs on each side. Next, push the hose in one side, then put 2 clamps down. Actually, we're using all 4 of them here. And you could orient them whichever way you want. I'm not really paying attention right now. Then we're going to attach the other side of the evap purge valve line straight in. Ride 2 of the clamps back onto the barb. And then we're going to put this back on the car just loosely. I mean, back on the manifold, which would be on the car. Now, what you're trying to do is you're trying to install the evap purge valve in such a way as to work your way around the brake booster fitting right here. And so what we're going to be doing is cutting approximately right here, if you can see where that knife is. Okay. Once we've got that cut off, we can take this off again. I suppose we don't need to put the clamps on just yet, but no matter. Actually, this one does have to stay on. We're going to be installing the Y fitting so that it is facing this way. Okay? I'm going to get some silicone spray on that again. Okay. In my case, I may have cut this a little bit too short. Okay. Center of the clamp on top of the barb. I'm going to do the same thing for the side. Again, make sure that your clamps, your 2 clamps are here before you attach this. Otherwise, you're going to have to pull it back off afterward. Okay, once you're done, you should have a little assembly that looks like this. Okay, and this will be going back onto the car now. done, it should look just like that. So now your brake booster will be able to connect back in here without touching any of this. And if you want to be extra safe, you can rotate these clamps away so the edges are not facing anything that you might not want to cut. There, now that's snapped back into place, and we're ready for the next part. And again, I was rushing a little bit so I can make sure we get this video so it's not too long, but you're probably going to want to cut this just a little bit longer than that. I would say probably 2 inches on that side, 2 1/4 on that side. All right, the next part, we're going to be connecting the big fittings to the PCV pipe. You're going to take your big pipe, and on the bottom of that, you're going to put the check valve from the big pipe you took off before. Now this is going to take quite a bit of silicone spray because this is a tight fit. You can get this other one sprayed in at the same time. Okay. And you wear gloves because it helps you get some leverage so this doesn't dig into your hand and start scuffing up your hand. But basically, we're going to be pushing this straight through and twisting as we're pushing. And it should fit just like that. Okay. Next, take your pliers, and you might be able to do this by hand even. Yep, take the clamp and bring it all the way down. These are bigger clamps so I can get more leverage with the gloves on. Okay, get one more clamp down. Again, you want to get the clamps in before you put the fitting on, especially for the 5/8 line, because it's really hard to get them back off afterward if you don't. Take a silicone spray on this T-fitting. And this T-fitting is going to come in like this. Again, I will take a quick shot from further back so you can kind of see the whole arrangement and what it's supposed to look like. But basically, you want it to look like this at this phase. Next, we're going to put the smaller section of hose at the end of this T-fitting. And again, you're twisting as you're going in, putting consistent pressure. If you're twisting as you're going in, it should go in just fine. I like to rotate these kind of into each other. It just tends to look a little nicer and prevents anything from rubbing on something else. There, just like that. The next part, put your last clamp on the hose. Put the clamp on the hose first before the terminal goes on, otherwise you're going to have problems. And we got the terminal that goes on now. So I'll try to actually keep this in the camera because I know I was trying to lift it up earlier. But basically, if you're twisting as you're pushing, then it'll go all the way to the end, and you want it all the way to the end. You don't want any gaps in there. And I'll explain why in a minute. And you can rotate this clamp so it's facing all the way down. All right, so this is where we are so far with the kit. The next part is going to be to take this 5/16 inch hose and cut 2 inches off of one end of it. So I've got a ruler here to my right, and I'm going to do this off the camera. Okay. That's the hose right there. That's a 2-inch section. I'm going to take this 2-inch section and put it on top of this barb right here. Grab a clamp. Actually, 2 clamps, and put this on. Next clamp. Now the check valve. The check valve has a little arrow on it. If you're looking carefully, you see that little triangle right there? That triangle has to face this way, away from the T-fitting. So we're going to put the check valve in, up into that little ridge, and you're going to center this clamp on top of the barb. If you can see, there's a little edge right here where the barb is sticking out. Center the clamp directly on top of the barb. Okay. And the next part goes on. It's a little easier if you get the clamp on first. This part goes on like so. And again, we're putting the clamp directly on top of the barb. Okay. Last part, we're going to be installing this rubberized clamp onto the hose. You're going to want it in this orientation. Okay. Take the manifold, install your first fitting right here. And again, I'm assuming you're doing this on the car because you can do it on the car and that's much easier. This section right here, on the car, you're going to have a fuel pressure regulator coming over, and the regulator is going to be right here and the hose is going to be over here. You want this line to go underneath the fuel pressure regulator, not on the outside and not above it. And this, assuming you have a stock manifold, is going to mount right over here. First, we're going to put, I'm going to take my gloves off because I don't need them anymore. You're going to put this washer right here. You're going to mount this right here. And then that extra screw that I included with the kit, if I can get it to stop falling, it's going to go right on there. If you already have an extra map sensor, like a 2011 model, you could just run that in the same spot. Okay. It's good enough for now. So this should end up looking something like this once you're done. And what this does is when the manifold's set up, it allows your check valve to stay at a downward angle. That way the check valve doesn't accumulate any fluids, and it does not stay at the lowest point, so it also doesn't frost up and freeze in the winter when condensation goes through the system. Last thing you'll need, the final clamp goes right here onto your Y fitting. And same as before, slide that on top of the barb. And that's it. From this point forward, it's probably going to sit closer to like this when it's actually on the car. From this point forward, you've got 15 hours to wait for that to cure. You can pull this back off to help that dry a little more quickly, to help the epoxy cure a little more quickly. And then after 15 to 24 hours, I would err more toward the 24-hour side if it's exception, like cold outside, like if it's winter. Once it's done, you can pop this back on and you're pretty much good to go. So this is essentially the install for the version 3.4 PCV Fix Kit. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you somehow lose your plug, let me know. I'll send you another one free of charge. Not a big deal at all. I'll help you guys out however I need to. Oh yeah, and you do have a spare check valve that you can put inside your glove box. I recommend using the same bag. Just kind of put it in the glove box so you know that it's there. And if you want to, you can throw in the note sheet just in case so you know exactly what the check valve is for. Keep that in the glove box. And if you ever need to swap this out, which you might at some point if the check valve gets dirty or clogged or fails in any other way, swap it out with this one. All you got to do is pull the two clamps off, take the hose off the check valve, put the new check valve on, and order yourself some more off the CruzeKits.com website. All right. Well, that's all I've got, guys. Again, let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and good luck with your install.